Okay, writing the research paper. Clearly, we have some masters sitting here who have written masterpieces, and really the talk is addressed to people at the back and those online who are, residents, junior consultants, whom I can share my knowledge with. And clearly, there is no right way to write a research paper. These are my thoughts that I'll share with you in the next 20 minutes, and you will develop yours over time. So you're ready to start writing. You've done the hard work. You have crunched all the numbers that you got. You have, spoken to the statisticians so many times that they're starting to ignore you now. And you've gone through the case files, online, offline, and you're ready to put your ideas into a manuscript. And in some ways, now is the time the real hard work begins. Let's see how we can make it a little easier. So I would start by gathering my thoughts. Who are we writing for? And generally, we are here talking about an oncology audience. So remember, there's this level of skill or knowledge that they already have. What are we writing? And I'm going to be talking about original research. There are so many types of manuscripts. And what is the overall theme going to be? And of course, most importantly, how long do you have? Deadlines have a way of creeping up on you very slowly. And time is of essence here. And this is the outline. These are the topics I'll talk about today. You have seen all these headlines, headers as seen in a research manuscript. And I'll talk in sequence for the sake of continuity, although one might argue that the abstract has to be written in the end. Let's start with the title. This is the poster for your paper. This is like the poster for your film. It is attention grabber, what you have exactly done. It is probably the most read part of your paper and probably the only read part of your paper. So you have to get it right. It summarizes what you have done in a simple manner, and it varies by the journal. Some titles are simple, some are much more complicated. They talk about the design, they talk about what was treated, who was treated, how many arms were there, etc. So it varies. Some people ask, is it okay to ask a question in a title? And I think it is okay to ask a question. But can you declare the results or not? Probably not, I would say, because that will take away all the intrigue, and people may not read your paper. So avoid writing the results in your title. More senior authors who write editorials and other commentary pieces, they use very memorable titles. Some of them are given here. They have a very, very high recall value. So, and these are just some of the examples. Coming to the abstract, if the title was the poster, this is the trailer of your paper. And I think probably the most important part of the writing the research paper. Because I don't have an estimate about this, but I guess a large majority will not go beyond reading the abstract because either they are not interested or they are not rich enough to pay for the full paper, or Sci-Hub is down, maybe it doesn't work. So the goal of the abstract is to keep the casual reader, get their attention, and to inform the busy reader. As you know, the abstract is generally limited to about 250 to 300 words. And believe me, when you're trying to fit everything into it, there's a big difference between 250 and 300. You really heave a sigh of relief when it is 300 rather than 250. So every word is precious. And most importantly, I think the abstract should be able to stand independently of the paper. On its own, there should be enough information that the reader gets. Without reading the paper, they should get what you're trying to say. I'll be giving some tips as we go along. The first one is, using short, incomplete sentences, spacing hacks, punctuations can help with the word limit, and it's almost an art form after a while to get it into 250 words. I'll spend some more time on the abstract. The purpose is the first bit. It's 1 or 2 lines, forms about 10% of the abstract. You just simply state the aim of what you did. The method talks is about 5-6 lines, about 30% of the abstract. You talk about the data set, who were treated, what kind of treatment was done, what were the endpoints. You may want to avoid statistical jargon and too many tests here because of the word limit. Results probably is the largest part of the abstract. You talk about what you found, how these findings, the primary, secondary endpoint, any relevant subgroups or post-hoc findings you found, these all come in the results, and all your p-values and the numbers, hazard rates, hazard ratios, DFS, OS comes in the results. Finally, the conclusion, again, 1 to 2 lines only. What is the takeaway message from your work? It should always be supported from what you have shown in the paper rather than what you think should be the answer to the question. Okay, so we've done the abstract, and as I said, it is best the abstract is done at the end of getting the whole manuscript because you have everything else in place. Let's come to the introduction. I ask my resident students generally to keep the introduction to 3 or maximum 4 short paragraphs. It sets the stage for what you're trying to showcase. The first paragraph talks about the field, what the background is, and what the current status is. And really, you need to understand that the reader also has some basic level of, you really don't need to always start saying India is a low middle income country and we have a lot of problems and there's a lot of population. Come to the point. Okay. Second paragraph talks about what the problems or the lacunae are, and third paragraph generally says that this is the work we propose and how it adds value. This is just an example of the same thing from one of the papers we wrote. Subfields, field, laying out the problem, present knowledge, and what we did. Okay. Methods is the longest section of the paper, and there's no clear fixed format, but it varies by journal. We talk about what was done, where it was done. We talk about start with the site of the study, ethics committee, cohort design, etc. And then who were studied, inclusion and exclusion criteria. This should be detailed enough, but not repetitive. Remember, don't repeat it. For example, if you have said M0 in inclusion criteria, don't make M1 as an exclusion criteria. I mean, that is obvious. So if you're confused, just say eligibility criteria. And detailed information about what treatment was given and using a lot of figures and flowcharts. Sometimes in methodologies can be complicated, so you can use figures that will really help for the readers to understand, keeping the word limit in place. My tip here, while writing the methods, it should be detailed enough that anybody who, your peer who is in the field should be able to reproduce what you have done by just reading the details in the paper. The statistics is one part of the methods section. If it is a cohort trial, prospective trial, or a randomized trial, it's easier to write because everything is pre-planned. You have said that this is going to be a primary endpoint, secondary endpoint, sample size, alpha, beta, hazard rates, etc., etc. But we often write retrospective reviews and audits. How do we write the statistics for that? Again, it comes with time, but there can be, you can use a certain format like demographic characteristics were analyzed using descriptive statistics, etc. Kaplan-Meier curve. You define your endpoints of overall survival, disease-free survival from what date to what date, etc. And these kind of things. So it becomes into a template over time. Now the results. Results report what you found. Often students don't bring methodology here. What you did was methodology. What you found is the results. Lot of less text and lot of graphs and tables is usually what is preferred in the results. demographics table of who the patients were treated is usually the table 1, and you can highlight some of the important features from the table 1 in the text. Don't exaggerate claims or interpretations in the result. In the world. So keep it to what you found. Table 1 looks something like this. It has got factors, disease factors and treatment related factors. If there are two groups, it is divided by groups. There are both categorical variables and continuous variables. Make sure you get their distribution right. For example, I have often seen some of the students initially, you talk about Gleason groups, but then you give a median of the Gleason. That's clearly not the right way to do it. And if there are imbalance between the groups, there's often a tendency to put a p-value there. I think that may not be the best thing to do, because yes, they are different, but whether we should be adding a p-value to that difference is something maybe I can get the answers from the masters sitting here. Figures and tables are very important part of the results. Make sure you pay attention to the quality and the access and the headings and formatting. My tip here, in the tables, make sure you get your numbers right. It's very easy to make a mistake and get your totals wrong. And you have made this lovely picture, spent hours doing this, and beautiful, but you don't have the money to pay the journal to print it in color. This is what happens. And then you will regret it. So be careful of that. Use the right color tone. It's just a tip. Now, discussion. Probably the hardest part for the residents to write. And I'm saying that because this is the time my residents stop seeing me, or they start avoiding me and they don't meet me anymore, because then I know they've reached the results section. But my advice is keep it simple. Prepare an outline and break it down into 5 or 6 paragraphs, and each paragraph should have a central theme about it. The first paragraph generally begins with what your research really showed. It's the big bang findings from what you did. I mean, it could be whatever, the main question that you answered, but don't bring in the p-values and differences and hazard ratios again. It should summarize and interpret your findings rather than repeating the results. Okay, next 3 or 4 paragraphs basically are, each paragraph talks about important findings of your work. It describes and compares your work with previous similar work and how the results differed from previous work, if they did, and if they did not, why not, and what are the interpretations of these. Again, I'm saying don't write to results section, just interpret your results and write it and discuss about what you found in the discussion section. And as I said, it can be quite tricky. Get help early to write the discussion. Don't avoid your mentors. They would be only happy to help you. One paragraph in the discussion is about the limitations. It's a very useful place for as a author. I'll tell you why. So many of all I'm talking of retrospective studies, audits, the works that we do. There are obviously a lot of limitations. Acknowledge all of them and give a justification why it may or may not be okay to have that limitation. And it's better to acknowledge more rather than reviewers telling us to do it for us. So that's a useful thing. And a tip I got actually from Dr. Sudhir Gupta, I think he's not here. Leave 1 or 2 obvious limitations for the reviewer to comment on. They'll be happy about it. So that I don't know if it works, but hopefully that's something that we can use. The conclusion. The conclusion is the take-home message of what you have done. It should always be supported by what you have found. And it should be consistent with what you have written in the abstract and what you set out to do in the introduction part of your paper. It should be fair and balanced, and it should also include any detriment or negative aspects that you have found. Now, I got this tip from an editor-in-chief. They actually use, again, I don't know how true it is, they use the conclusion part to see and use it for desk rejections to see, I mean, if it doesn't match up with what you actually claimed you have done. So be careful what you write in the conclusion. And I would avoid claims outside the scope of your work, exaggeration or trying to spin things positively. And my favorite pet peeve, using in conclusion or in summary. Of course, we are writing a conclusion, so it is going to be in conclusion. So these are small things that you evolve over time. Citations are little brackets, numbers in the text. It's best that as you're writing the paper, you note down the author, year, and journal so that you can work on it later. And you have to choose your citations wisely, as is the theme of this meeting. Choose standard guidelines, standard landmark papers, etc. And there are generally no references or in the abstract, result, or conclusion. It's only mainly in the methods and discussion section. Self-citation is okay, but don't push it. It is, and I believe journals like their own articles cited, but don't push it. Okay, this is probably the most boring aspect of the paper, and so it's often the most neglected, but it shows attention to detail. There are several good reference managers available. Some of them are free. Learn to use them before you start writing any of this. It's really helpful. It's a lifesaver. And recheck your bibliography before final submission. And I'll tell you what, errors in bibliography are often picked up by the editors and reviewers. And again, I would, if there are several errors there, I would maybe subconsciously think about the quality of research that you've done if you've not got your references right. Author list is something that I'll not talk about much. It is for the senior author to decide what happens, but it's an important part of the paper. As a junior who's starting off writing the manuscript, make sure you get the spellings and qualifications right. That can be very embarrassing at times. But credit the entire team, obviously, it's important. Those who don't make the author list are acknowledged. Funding support, writing assistance. Well, we don't have writing assistance, so any logistical or administrative help that you may have. And then submission. Well, that is a different battle altogether, and I'm not going into it. It's a whole, again, an art form to submit and resubmit and resubmit and resubmit again. So there's a very nice checklist I got. This is from Dr. Zarowski. He published it on Twitter, and a very useful checklist to get your submission right. Some of my final thoughts: keep your readership in mind and keep it simple. I think that is the key. I would, in fact, I also often recommend show the manuscript to a junior or a colleague from a different department, or an aunt or a relative with a background in science. If they can understand what you're writing, you're on the right path. Pay attention to formatting. It makes a big difference. And acknowledge as many people as you can. And if you're in doubt, do it. My final tip: a perfect first draft is an oxymoron. You will never get it right in the first time. I have seen many students who wait for weeks and months because they want to make a perfect first draft to show sir. Don't do it. You show the paper, and then it will evolve over time. As I said, it takes time. And if nothing works, I found this very intriguing article recently. If you don't know how to write the paper, There is a software algorithm called GPT-3. It's a AI-based software that actually writes very well on its own. It's well known, it's created poetry, it's created a book from the 18th century on its own, completely new. And it's written entertaining opinion pieces. So the task given to GPT-3 was write an academic thesis of about 500 words about yourself and add scientific references and citations inside. In 2 hours, it wrote the whole thing and cheekily concluded, we believe that the benefits of letting GPT write about itself outweigh the risks. But put in a word of caution that this should be monitored to mitigate any negative consequences. Thank you so much.